What's up, everybody? Doomandback, and welcome to the 6th episode of Godzilla Thon. This time we're going to be talking about 1964's Mothra Vs Godzilla. Now, this movie is absolutely amazing, and I just want to say right off the bat that this movie is one of the most loved Godzilla movies universally by all fans out of the entire Showa series, and mostly the entire series in general. It definitely deserves that praise because it is just that good. So, this movie is very nostalgic for me. I have a deep love for this movie. It was one of the first ones I owned. I owned it on VHS. I used to watch it all the time when I was sick. I just really liked it a lot. And, that was mostly amplified by the music in the movie, which we'll talk about towards the end. It is some of the best Godzilla music ever. So the movie starts out, and it feels very nostalgic for me for this reason as well, is the Toho Scope logo. Something that didn't happen in the 54 movie because Toho Scope didn't exist in 54 or 55 when Raids Again was made. And also the Universal cut of King Kong vs. Godzilla, the English cut, I don't believe it has the Toho Scope logo, or if it does, it wasn't a standout feature at the start. But in this movie, you see it at the start in all its glory, and you really get the sense that Toho Scope really does make the difference. And, Toho Scope's just a different aspect ratio specific to Toho, and it was really good. And I love the logo. It's very classic, and that's one of the things that helps this movie's nostalgia level for me. Okay, so really fast before we begin, I'm going to be reviewing the Japanese cut and only mentioning the English cut at the very end. So the movie starts out with a typhoon washing up a giant egg. Now, we find out what this egg is later, but at this point it's knocked off an island and is washed away in the ocean. Ichi is our news journalist. He is investigating this giant egg, which is found by our scientist Mirai. Kayama, our movie's villain, stops them, and he explains that he bought the egg, which is pretty funny because the egg rolled off into this fishing territory, and so the fishermen were able to lay claim on it, and so they sold the egg to him. So because they thought that they had the rights to it. Now, he explains that the egg is going to be open for all to view, but he's going to profit off of it because, he's a sleazebag. Now, I want to talk about these three characters, okay? So, Ichi he's a pretty likable character in general. A lot of the criticism that comes with Godzilla movies is with the human characters. People saying that they're standard and boring and blah, which is not the case. I think he's a great character. And him, as well as Mirai, who's one of the very few recurring characters in the Godzilla series. He'll show up next movie as well. He's a pretty great character. He's kind of a bitter scientist, which is what's great about him. And then you have the awesome villain Kayama, who, he's one of those villains who's not really that over-the-top evil. He's just kind of a scumbag, which is what's great about him, is there are people like him in real life, which is one of the things about this movie is it ties in with the allegory towards the end, is there are a lot of these characters do exist in the real world, which is why it's one of the reasons it's cool. So Kayama explains to them that he's going to plan to profit off the egg, and Torahata and Kayama, they are the two who are running this operation. So Ichi and Mirai and our main human characters, they are investigating what's going on. They're kind of done. They don't want this. They are opposed to this idea 100%. So when they're investigating what's going on, trying to find out that who's in charge of Kayama's plan, when they find out it's Torahata, it's because Torahata and Kayama attempt to kidnap Mothra's fairies because, once again, they're sleazebags and they want to profit off them. So Ichi's assistant Yoka and Mirai find Mothra's fairies as well as Mothra. So this is a cool sequence because one thing that's really great about this movie is how ambitious the special effects were. One thing that I think a lot of people overlook when talking about this movie is specifically the way they handle the fairies. So the way they handle the fairies, they have them in shots alongside of our human characters when they are shrunken down to like 1/16 the scale of a normal human. It is very impressive special effects for the time, and a lot of people just focus on the suitmation, the miniatures, the action scenes. They don't focus on the little details like this. The fact that you see them running around this apartment when, or I guess it's a hotel, when Kayama and Torahata, Torahata's awesome. When Kayama and Torahata are attempting to kidnap them, they're running around, they're interacting with their environment. Really ambitious stuff, and then, it all comes together in the next movie. I think does it better with them, with Ghidorah the three-headed monster. I think does it better, but just amazing special effects in this movie. So they find Mothra's fairies and they explain to them what's going on. This is Mothra's egg. and you guys need to get it back to us, otherwise things are going to go bad. So they also get to see Mothra, who in the American cut is referred to as the Thing through a lot of it, I think. I don't watch the American cut as much anymore because I don't think the music is as standout in the American cut. It's the same music, but I don't think all of it makes it in. So Torahata and Kayama build up this big cage. Mothra's egg is contained, and they're going to use it as an attraction. They're going to make like a theme park kind of thing out of it, make it a big, huge event, so people from all over the world will come see it, pay to see it, and they'll make tons of money off of it. And then they also, when they find out it's Mothra's egg, they decide it'll be a good idea if they start heating the egg to incubate it to try and get it to hatch faster and to also keep Mothra's babies alive. So, you know, they are not up to any good, but at the same time, it's not like Kayama's really the bad guy here, because he's just kind of going with it. He's just kind of going with Torahata's plan, trying to like he realizes it's a money-making opportunity. He's not there to get anyone hurt, whereas Torahata is a much more unlikable character. He's a much more just straight-up villain. He's also still just a businessman at the end of the day, but he's much more of a villain character than Kayama, I would argue. So the fairies are just fed up with it. They're done with everything. They head off to Infinite Island. Now's when Yoka and Ichi find out that at the beginning of the movie, when they were investigating the typhoon the typhoon flooding, they find out that the land that they were on is highly radioactive. So they have to go to Mirai, get decontaminated, and then they head back out to the field to try and figure out what the heck's going on there. So at the field, they're searching around with Geiger counters. The Geiger counters are spiking. There's radiation everywhere, but they're being kicked out by the landowner. The landowner doesn't really like Ichi, and he doesn't like Yoka because they are news journalists, and they wrote a bad article about him, saying that, you know, he wasn't thinking realistically, and his deadline to clean the water wasn't going to happen, which it does, and he cleans all the water out. One thing that he doesn't clean out is what's under the ground. So Godzilla appears in one of his most odd yet iconic entrances ever into a movie. This is an awesome entrance. I mean, I love it. So a lot of people are confused. How does Godzilla wind up here? I don't think it's specifically stated. I think it's just implied that he was washed ashore in the typhoon and just buried in the dirt. Now, why was he washed ashore? Because he was sitting in Tokyo Bay due to his fight with King Kong. He was knocked down there, and he stayed there, and then he got washed on shore, presumably. So now he rises up out of the ground. He's covered in dirt. 1964 Godzilla suit for this movie specifically, not next movie, which is also made in 64, but this suit. Obviously, you guys who have been watching my channel for a while now, you know how much I love this suit. I absolutely love this suit. It is one of my favorite suits ever. My favorite suit of the early Showa series. It's only rivaled by one other suit in the Showa series, which I think this one's the coolest, and I think this one's the most menacing, but I just have a nostalgia for the 75 suit. Whereas this suit is just an awesome Godzilla. He is menacing in this movie. And one thing that I really love about this is a mistake. So Godzilla's cheeks and jaw, that is a mistake. The way they're so big and they're so heavy that they flop around, that wasn't meant to happen. That's because the suit gets damaged during filming, and they damage the mouth, so the upper jaw wiggles around, and it just gives him more weight in the movie. It gives it a more realistic kind of feel, whereas, yeah, he would be shaking around because he is that heavy. I absolutely love it, and it was a mistake, and I'm glad they left it in there. Anyways, I realize I'm not talking quite about Godzilla's entrance himself, so he rises up out of the dirt, everyone's freaked out, which is an amazing scene, and I have to credit the movie for this once again. Is one thing that King Kong vs. Godzilla doesn't do very well is no one really cares that it's Godzilla. So in Godzilla Raids Again, people at least care that it's Godzilla because they're like, oh crap, that thing destroyed Tokyo in 1954. Now it's 1955, there's another one, and there's also an Anguirus running around. We're screwed. Whereas in King Kong vs. Godzilla, they're more of just like, it's a giant monster, run away and be scared. King Kong, ooh. But in this one, they're like, oh, that's Godzilla and we're all gonna die. And that's one thing I absolutely love, is just how menacing this movie makes Godzilla. This is one of those Showa films that doesn't take the camp too much. This is one of the ones that, sure, it has some campiness. It's got the Mothra song, which I absolutely love the Mothra song, but this one is one of those ones where it is just down to business, a serious movie, and I love it. You also have some comedy with some of the human characters, but still, once again, this movie is one of those down-to-business Showa films. This is what it is to be a true Godzilla film. I love it. So, Godzilla has a really impressive destruction scene. He destroys some factories where you see human characters who are real humans in the front running around, looking at him, being freaked out. You see him in the background walking through this factory. You see him get into the factory, blow stuff up with his atomic breath, and I mentioned this in my War of the Gargantuas review, how impressive some of those double projection shots were and how impressive some of those compositions were. This movie is just the same. This movie has, and it's 1964, so it's even more impressive because it's earlier. So this movie has some absolutely amazing visuals. We'll talk more about the special effects at the end, but this movie, if you couldn't tell, guys, this is one of my favorite Godzilla movies ever. The special effects are so good and so well handled, it's awesome. Specifically, the way Godzilla is handled in this movie makes him awesome, and the way the special effects were done complement that perfectly. If this Godzilla looked worse, if the suit was worse, if it was, if they didn't film right, like they filmed in Godzilla Raids Again, where he moves all quickly, it wouldn't work. But in this one, he is just a slow, lumbering tank, and anything in his path is going to be destroyed. There's no question about it. I absolutely love it. So he has a really impressive destruction scene. He walks around destroying everything. This is the scene that breaks his upper jaw, is when he falls. So what happened is the suit actor was supposed to go destroy the pagoda, presumably, and he actually slipped. Haru Nakajima slipped, slammed the head of Godzilla into the pagoda. You can see it happen in the movie. Slams the head into the pagoda, and the top jaw is knocked loose, and it flops around for, I believe, the rest of the film. They might have fixed it at one point or another. But I love that. And then the pagoda destruction scene itself is really impressive because he tears the whole thing down and it falls on top of him. He just walks away. He has some other cool moments where his tail gets stuck inside of some sort of radio tower and he pulls it down as he's trying to get his tail out. Really cool stuff. So our main crew head to Infant Island to negotiate with Mothra's fairies to try and get Mothra to help fight Godzilla. The people on Infant Island 100% just, they say, no, you guys got to get out of here. You're not welcome here. The reason for this ties into the allegory is because Infant Island was this beautiful land. It was an amazing, this is what we're told, it was an amazing, just exotic place, and then there was some nuclear bomb tests, and the island only has one patch of green spot left. The rest of it is just a boneyard. And this also has the infamous Turtle Man kaiju in the background. If you don't know what I'm talking about, there's a scene when Mirai, Ichi, and Yoka are walking around on Infant Island looking for the fairies and the natives. They walk past this odd looking turtle in the background. I don't know why people, it's very most kaiju fans, most hardcore Godzilla fans know what this is. I recognize it. I don't know the name of it. It's got a name, but it's just one of those weird things that was put in the Godzilla movies that people have always been like, hey, what was the deal with that? Because I don't know, it's weird. It's weird. So our main crew, they find the natives. The natives take them back to the green spot on the island. They say this is the only inhabitable part of the island, pretty much. That's what they tell them. Then they say, you're not getting Mothra. We're not going to help you because you didn't help us. In fact, you bombed us. And then you bombed us, and when we asked you to help us get our egg back, you denied us, and you tried to kidnap our fairies. Why would we ever help you? And this is when the movie gets a little bit preachy for a minute, when I believe it's Yoka goes on a little bit of a, she goes off and she says, basically the main gist of her story is people are all equal regardless of one thing or another. We are all people of the same planet. You don't get the right to choose who lives and who dies. You don't get the right to choose if good people die with the bad, because good people are dying just as well as the bad. And that's awesome because, first of all, Ashiro Honda was great at giving his female characters really strong voices in his movies. You saw it in the original 54 movie with the reporter in the press conference. You see it in this movie. You see it pretty much consistently throughout his movies. Katsura in Terror of Mechagodzilla. And she, Yoka is a really strong female character, and she's not one of those in-your-face, this is a female character, you gotta love it, kind of shoved down your throat kind of thing that current movies do. This was just subtle. She is the one who gets things to happen. I also forgot Emiko from the original 1954 movie. She is the one who gets stuff to happen. She's the one who gets Ogata to get Serizawa to use the Oxygen Destroyer. Honda using the female characters like this is a really welcome addition, because this is how you do female characters right. People nowadays are very worried about how to handle it, because if you don't handle them well, then you're seen as a sexist. Whereas if you handle them too much, then it's just shoved down your throat, and it's a very obvious attempt to try and cash in on the success of this, new kind of everyone wants, the spotlight in the movie kind of thing. And this was a much better way to do it, where it's more subtler, they don't throw it in your face, they don't cramp it down your throat, it's just there, it just happens. Other than this, her speech basically doesn't work. It gets through to the fairies, but not to the islanders yet. So the fairies start singing to Mothra, and our crew head over to talk to them. After the fairies song, Mothra agrees to help fight Godzilla, but Mothra knows she's gonna die. This is one thing that is really great, is Mothra's characterization. Now, I still have yet to see the original Mothra. I now own it, but I haven't had time to watch it yet. But Mothra's character is one of the most complex of any kaiju ever, which is kind of funny to say because it's a puppet. So it is one of the most complex. It's up there with Sanda and Gaira, where she, in the first Mothra movie, I know the general story is she only destroys things because the fairies are kidnapped and endangered. In this movie, not only is she on her deathbed, but now her children are endangered, and she knows that if she dies, her children's egg, the egg is destroyed, that's it, there's no more Mothras. So she agrees to go help fight Godzilla, and she knows that she's gonna die, which is a very, it's a very cool thing, just to have a kaiju knowingly sacrifice itself like this. This is amplified by the fact that the fairies, they have that deep connection with Mothra, and they can speak for her, and they, that whole deal. So the military plans a high-voltage lightning rod wire trap to fight Godzilla. It's really weird, like, the specifics of it. There are these big towers that shoot lightning bolts. They're like high-voltage towers, and then they were planned to drop nets on Godzilla and use the lightning on him. This is presumably because it worked on him in King Kong vs. Godzilla. Once again, it's a continuity error because it didn't work on the 54 Godzilla yet. It will eventually work in this movie. So it's a continuity error. Once again, I have to mention the fact this is a different Godzilla than the one in 54. Maybe the one in 54 was a little more resistant to that, but you should think that this Godzilla, based off how much he tanks throughout the series, you would think that he would be able to stand up to it. He's not, though. So during all this, Kayama is approached by the fishermen who he bought the egg from, who are basically saying, yo, you said you were going to pay for this egg, and you didn't. We need our money, and he doesn't have the money. So he calls in Torhata to help. Torhata has tons of extra cash, and he basically just says, nah, screw that, you're on your own. Sorry, bud. So, Kayama goes to Torhata's hotel and beats the snot out of him, tries to take some money from him. Kayama is shot and killed by Torhata. Now, you'd think, oh, yay, one of the villains is dead, but once again, like I said, Torhata's the real villain of the movie. He's the mastermind behind it all. So, he gets away with the money. As he's leaving the hotel, this is where that thing from earlier of the bad people will die along with the good and the innocent will die along with the guilty comes into play again. Where as Torhata's leaving this hotel, Godzilla shows up and he destroys the thing. You see his tail go through it. You see, you see inside, pillars are falling down, the walls are caving in, the ceilings are falling down. Torhata is killed. So he's killed, but at the same time, you also see some innocent civilians trying to leave the hotel, and they are also killed. Once again, menacing Godzilla. I love it. One of my favorite things, if you guys also have watched my channel for a while, you know one of my favorite things is when Godzilla is the villain, so this one does that really well. So Godzilla decides he's going to destroy Mothra's egg. There's no reason for it. He just kind of shows up in the area, sees it, and is like, that looks like a thing I could step on. So he walks over to it. Mothra shows up just in time, saves the egg, basically. Mothra vs. Godzilla. So this fight's pretty cool. Mothra kicks around. She doesn't have very many attacks against Godzilla. You wouldn't think she would. She's a flying moth, and a giant one, though. She has very few attacks. So she has the pollen that she can spit out of her mouth. I don't believe she does that in this fight. She has this deadly pollen that she can spray out of her wings. It's poisonous, and it hurts Godzilla quite a bit. But mostly, she just uses her wings to use massive wind power to throw Godzilla around. She also grabs onto his tail a lot, and it throws him off balance, and he's getting knocked all over the place, not knowing quite what to do with such a fast opponent. He's using his atomic breath and blasting the crap out of her. She's not handling it very well. She's going to die. She's already on her deathbed. This is just solidifying her fate. She starts using that pollen, and the fairies explain this is the last thing she'll ever do. She's going to die. So Mothra uses her pollen, and then she dies. She does. She flies over to the egg, lands on it, puts her wing over the egg, and then she dies. And Godzilla, you'd think he'd destroy the egg, but instead he just kind of walks away. He just doesn't really care. This is a really cool scene. So the military attack Godzilla. Godzilla, you just see the scene of him lumbering around a corner, this big corner, and then there's their trap, their high tension wire trap. So they put it into effect. There is one continuity error with this scene actually. Is the movie switches from day and night kind of drastically. The Mothra vs. Godzilla fight is during the day. This scene takes place during the night, and then the next scene takes place during the day. Don't know what the deal was. Maybe the directors just thought this shot looked cooler in the nighttime. I don't know what the deal was, but it's a continuity error. It's noticeable. So the electric net trap itself has very little effect against Godzilla. They do blast him with the high tension wires, these electric things, and then they knock him down with the netting, which is what I was saying. It does work. It gets him. He gets knocked down, and they blow him up with a whole bunch of planes. But this movie does a really good job at showing just how invincible Godzilla really is. So he stands up afterward. He's just done. He's done. His head, the suit actor's head, as well, was set on fire in this scene. Godzilla doesn't care. He just kind of brushes it off, which you have to think. Haru Nakajima got the Godzilla head was on fire. He had to brush it off and keep acting as Godzilla. He couldn't do anything about it. Really impressive dedication here. The suit actors in these movies, credit to them because they deserve it. They should win awards. I mean, they should have been winning all the awards back then. They did way more than real actors do. I really believe that. They were put through so much more. So Godzilla eventually, he defeats these traps. He gets up, and then he eventually, once he overpowers the military, overpowers these high tension wires, he heads off in his own direction. He goes over to a different island. So when he's on his way over to the island, once again, lots of really great double projection shots of him coming around the corner when you have policemen escorting people out of the city in the foreground. There's this one dude who's basically explaining, hey, you guys got to go back to that island, get people off that island. There's a teacher and her students on that island. Godzilla's going to wind up killing them. You got to go save them. So the police, as well as our main characters, get on this boat. They head over there, along with Mothra's fairies, and Mothra's egg is hatched at this point, I believe. Mothra's egg just hatched by this point. There's two larvas that come out, and then they're like these brown caterpillars. Then they head off to the island after Godzilla. They chase him down. They're much faster than he is because they're much smaller, so that's their advantage over him that they'll come into play later in their fight. So the two larvae head off towards Godzilla. So once Godzilla makes landfall on the island, he is very quickly stopped by Mothra's babies, who show up pretty fast afterward and distract him. So the teacher and the students are rescued. Our main human characters are safe for the rest of the movie. Now, Godzilla and Mothra's twins. So Godzilla and Mothra's twins have the rematch, Mothra vs. Godzilla 2.0. Godzilla won the first round. The second round goes a little bit differently. So the rematch is really cool because the way that it's handled, you know that Godzilla can kill these two fairies. You know that Godzilla can kill these two caterpillars if he gets the chance. But the thing is, he's such a slow, lumbering brute that he just can't catch up to them. They are so much smarter than him, too. They not necessarily even just smarter. They're just more agile. They're quicker. They know how to outrun him. So they just go different directions. He's fighting one. He's trying to stop one. Once he catches the one, the other one will come up from behind him and spit the pollen out of its mouth. It'll get all over him. He'll turn around, go after that one. The other one will get away. They shoot this pollen that's like a spider web. He is completely encased in the spider web, and then so they win. They win the fight just because he's so slow that he is able to. He's not able to outmaneuver them, and they get him. They win. So once he's completely wrapped up in this web, he's knocked into the ocean. He falls back into the ocean, and we don't see him until next movie. Now, Mothra's two fairies swim away in the ocean. Mothra's two caterpillars swim away in the ocean. Mothra's fairies ride them, and they go off into the sunset. That's the end of the movie, and it is awesome. So the way that, like I said, the way that the end fight is handled, you know Godzilla can win. But he doesn't get to just because the two Mothra larvae outsmart him, which is a really cool way to do it. Brains versus bronze, that's what the fight is, and I love it. Because the first fight is a terminal Mothra versus Godzilla. It's obvious who's going to win. Even if Mothra was able to stop him briefly, she's going to wind up dying anyways. So it's a cool way to show that Mothra's fairies... It's a cool way to show that Mothra is still a force to be reckoned with, even when fighting Godzilla. It's also important to note that this is Godzilla's third fight, and at this point he's lost 2 of the 3 fights that he's been in, and he is lost in every movie he's been in by this point. He is killed in the first movie, he is taken out in the ice fortress in the second movie, he is beaten by King Kong in the third movie. Now he rolls around the fourth movie, and he's defeated by two larvae, which just shows Godzilla at the time. People weren't rooting for him. He was the bad guy. The good guys typically win over the bad guys. Godzilla wasn't winning anytime soon, up until next movie. So, I guess I shouldn't say anytime soon, because the next movie comes out the same year as this one, but it comes out later. And I mean, when Godzilla's the villain, he's not winning anytime soon. So, well, up until the Heisei series. But that's a long time away, so that one technically works with what I said a minute ago. Anyways, this movie is so great. I love it so much. I want to talk about the Japanese cut. I want to finish off the Japanese cut before I get into the English cut. So, the Japanese cut, it has very deep allegory. Once again, Ishiro Honda back in director's chair, he's going to throw in some allegory. In 54, that was only allegory. That movie was allegory. It was just so deep on every single level imaginable. I mean, it was a post-war reflection. It was a new era. It was criticizing the old ways of Japanese politics. It was criticizing the new ways of Japanese politics. It was criticizing the way World War II ended with the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It was so many different levels working together to create that film. King Kong vs. Godzilla was a little bit different. That was more of a satire on marketing, as well as just kind of the television boom in Japan. Kind of a weird thing to do in a Godzilla movie. Like I said last review, it didn't work very well. This movie, however, gets back to more of the roots, gets into more of the deep, nitty-gritty kind of allegory kind of stuff. This is a very, very allegory-rich movie. Kind of piggybacks off what I've heard Mothra does, which is a very apparently religious allegory movie. This one has slight tones of religion in there with the natives on Infant Island, but for the most part, that's left out of this movie and kept in Mothra. But at the same time, it is an anti-nuclear movie, especially with Infant Island being as the state that it's in, with half of it being blown up, the other half of it being so radiated you can't live there, and then only a tiny little chunk of it being inhabitable. You have Godzilla showing up, who is he's menacing, and he is once again the embodiment of a atomic bomb, which is awesome to see, especially with the way the atomic breath is once again handled, just completely devastating. And the rest of it, it's just, you have so much deep stuff with especially Yoka's character. There is still good in this world. One of the very few, I feel, hopeful Ishiro Honda movies. He did not seem to be a very hopeful person. He seemed to be the kind of person who looked at the world and went, we're on a bad path and we are screwed. He was kind of the anti-Gene Roddenberry, who was like, look to the future, it's going to be great. Shiro Honda was like, oof, we are going down a bad path and we're going to kill ourselves. This is one of the very few hopeful endings to one of his movies with there is still good in the world. Mothra agrees to help against the fight of Godzilla because there is still good in the world. The line, I think the line is there, you don't have the right to choose if innocent people die alongside non-innocent people, if they die with the guilty, if the good die with the bad. You don't have the right to choose that. That right is sacred. So this movie, it shows there is still hope. And that's one thing that I really like, because you don't get that a lot with these movies. They're a lot of the time a lot darker. So it was nice to see. Now, the thing that I have to talk about is, even with Mothra vs. Godzilla itself, the fighting itself, Mothra is the good guy, Godzilla is the bad guy. She loses the first fight. The good guys don't always win. But then at the end of the movie, her babies go and they avenge her. The good guy gets to win after all. There may have been a sacrifice, but in the end, the good still prevails over evil. Very hopeful ending for Ishiro Honda. Very different than most of his movies, especially Terror of Mechagodzilla, which was pretty much the opposite ending of saying, yeah, no, things aren't good. So, I don't know if it was just like the year he was like, you know what, we'll do some happy stuff. Because, the next movie also ends on a kind of happy note. So, interesting stuff here. Now I want to talk about the US cut. It is a little bit different. There's a lot of scenes cut out, certain characters are cut out, certain subplots are gone, or at least hardly still there. Most of the stuff with, I feel like Mirai got kind of shortchanged in the English cut. He's a very complex character in the Japanese cut, not really featured in the American cut. So the other thing that the American cut does that I think it does better, it has an epic beach sequence. And this scene, for those of you who have seen it, there's a longer version of it than the one that's in the DVD or VHS. I just happened to see it online the other day. It's very interesting. So you have these generals meet, these American generals meet with these Japanese generals, and they talk about, what are we going to do about Godzilla? Because he's an international threat at this point. He's just that dangerous. Something that Shin Godzilla does very well. So they have this conversation. They're like, yeah, no, you guys should lure him to the beach, and then we'll blow him up with our army ships. Really cool sequence here where they get Godzilla on the beach. He's walking around. They are firing missiles upon missiles on him, and he is just walking straight through them. They're hitting him. He's blown up. They're blowing up the ground all around him. Everything's exploding all around him. He's just walking. He doesn't really notice at all, showing how indestructible he is. It's one of the best scenes of the movie. Can't believe they cut it out of the Japanese cut. I think I read online Ishiro Honda thought that it was kind of too out of nowhere. He didn't really, I think I read like he didn't really want the US participation in the movie or something like that. I don't quite know what the deal was, but they reinserted it in the English cut because they wanted it to be a more international appealing movie. And I think it's an awesome scene. I really wish they didn't cut it because it's really cool. Now, this scene also has a continuity error. It is still at nighttime, whereas the scene following and the scene beforehand would have been in daytime. Or technically, the scene beforehand would have most likely, I believe the scene right before this is the scene with the high tension wires, so that would have been nighttime. But it's surrounded by two daytime scenes that are supposed to be happening at the same time. It's very clunky. But it is such a cool scene. I really wish they didn't cut it. So now, finally, in conclusion, what are my thoughts on the special effects? If you couldn't tell already, they're incredible. The wire work on Mothra is so impressive. The way they had Mothra fighting Godzilla, the way Mothra and Godzilla's wires with the tail didn't get all tangled up and didn't get ruined in the shots, that's impressive on its own hand. Whereas with the Mothra babies as well being puppets, that's also impressive. With the suit acting, with the head catching on fire, with the malfunctions, with the mouth breaking, really good stuff. In the result, it is amazing how well this turned out. I mean, this movie kind of had quite a bit of things stacked against it, and it worked with the Mothra fairies being handled as well as they were, as well as just the pyrotechnics on set. It's a very impressive movie. Very, very good. Double projection shots are amazing in here. I love it. So, the effects, Agent Tsuburaya, very good. The human story, I'm going to not do the characters one by one anymore. I'm just going to talk about specifically human stories alone. Human story's good. Alright, a lot of people don't give the Godzilla movies credit. They're like, monster scenes, human stories, you could cut that out and it wouldn't be any different. Not true, especially not in movies like this. The humans progress the plot, even though there is a subplot with them being reporters and investigating what's going on here and trying to figure out this stuff and that stuff. At the end of the day, they are the one who get Mothra to go fight Godzilla, so they do move the story a lot and they do progress things, and they are needed. I like the human story, I like the human characters, I like the human villains. I don't think any of it needs to be cut out. Let's talk about my favorite part of the movie. The music is so incredible. Now, King Kong vs. Godzilla and Godzilla 1954, they both had great music. Akira Ifukube, there's no doubting he is a very talented person. But this is where he got his game on. Alright? The 54 movie has some very classic music that you can't go wrong with. But it was prototype. He was just composing it. He didn't perfect it yet. Now, King Kong vs. Godzilla, he changed it a little bit. He messed with it, he tweaked it, he tried to make it different. And King Kong vs. Godzilla has a couple standout songs. It has about 3 standout songs. Specifically, Godzilla Resurrection is a good one. That was also used in Shin Godzilla. But this is the movie where he hits his stride. From here on out, his music is perfect pretty much. There are movies that are misses, but then most of the movies from here on out are hits. This one I think is one of the best ones he's ever done. In fact, I might even say it's the best one he's ever done. I'll have to listen to him. I listened to all the soundtracks before doing the Godzilla Thons. I'll have to listen to him again, but this is my favorite one in the early Showa series. Pretty much this is my favorite one in the Showa series. It is so good, and especially with the main theme of this movie, Godzilla's main theme, it's amazing. I love it so much. If you guys couldn't tell, this movie is just, it's one of those ones that works on almost every level for me. So, honestly guys, go check out the soundtrack alone. It is so epic. This is where Akira Ifukube, like I keep saying, this is where he gets it right. And from here on out, he gets it right. So, in conclusion guys, Mothra vs. Godzilla. Japanese cut, what do I give it? I'm going to give it a 9.5 out of 10. English cut, I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. I wish it kept that extra stuff in there, but it also has that amazing scene on the beach. So, go check this movie out. If you have not seen it, I can't recommend it enough. It is one of the movies, I think this is one of the best movies a Godzilla fan, like a newcomer, could start on. If you want to introduce someone to Godzilla, start them on this one, because it is so good. It is just, it's not going to bog them down like the 54 movie might, where they're going to be like, oh, black and white, boring, no fighting, just kind of, there's a lot of people like that. I'm not like that. You guys can clearly tell from my review of that movie, but there are a lot of people like that. Whereas this one, it's a colored movie, it's entertaining, it's fun, it's got, comedy, it's got all this different stuff. It works. It works on so many different levels. I absolutely love this movie. So, see you guys next time for my review of Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster in 1964. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you all for watching. D-Man out.